We continue now at the top of Daf Samechet Aleph and Mesechet Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 68a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara brought Rabbi Akiva in the Mishnah. Rabbi Akiva in the Mishnah said that there are two kinds of sorcery that can be involved in the gathering of cucumbers. In one case, the person is actually using sorcery to gather the cucumbers, and that person would be liable. But in some situations, the person is just deceiving the eyes, and in that situation, the person would be exempt. And the Gemara said, and the Mishnah said rather, that Rabbi Akiva learned this. It was Mishum Rabbi Yoshua. He learned it from Rabbi Yoshua. So the Gemara now asks, V'ha Rabbi Akiva mi Rabbi Yoshua Gomer la. Did Rabbi Akiva really learn this from Rabbi Yoshua? Rashi says, V'ham milsa de lakitas kishu, in this idea of gathering the cucumbers through sorcery. Rabbi Akiva mi Rabbi Yoshua Gomer la bitmi. The Gemara is asking this as a question. Did he really learn that from Rabbi Yoshua? V'atanya, but we learned in a brisa. Kishachala Rabbi Eliezer, when Rabbi Eliezer was ill, and Nichnasu Rabbi Akiva v'chaver of Levakra, Rabbi Akiva and his colleagues, they came to visit him. Hu Yoshev Bekinov Shalom, he was sitting, Bekinov Shalom means to say in his bed with a canopy, he was sitting in his canopy. V'hein Yoshvin Betraklin, and they were sitting in the area on the outside of the room, waiting to see if they could get in. Betraklin Shalom, they were in his traklin, in his parlor. V'yosva Yom Erev Shabbos hoy, and that day was Erev Shabbos. V'nichnas Hurkanas Beno Lachlotz Tefilav, and Hurkanas, his son, meaning the son of Rabbi Eliezer, he went into Rabbi Eliezer's room to take off his tefillin because Shabbos was coming. Rashi explains, Lachlotz Tefilav Shel Aviv, he was taking off the tefillin of his father to Kasavar because he held Shabbos Lavzman tefillin, that Shabbos is not the time for tefillin. V'yosr lanichon, it's forbidden to wear them at that time. Shem yotze ben l'Rosh Hashanah, maybe he's going to go out with them into Rosh Hashanah, so therefore Hurkanas came to take off his tefillin. Goar bo v'yotze ben Azifa, so Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanas yelled at his son Hurkanas, and he left. He was berated. Amar lehen lechaveirav, so he said to his colleagues, Kimeduma ani shadaito shalaba nitrafa. It seems that father has went insane because he's yelling at me for no reason. Rashi explains, Shadaito shalaba nitrafa v'karav hu lamas, he's about to die. Shilo hayadaitu miyusheves hayacholitz tefillah, because if his mind was settled, he would have known to take off his tefillin. He would have taken off his tefillin. Amar lahen, so he said to them, Rabbi Eliezer heard this, and he said to them, Daito v'das imo nitrafa. It's actually his understanding, it's the understanding of his mother that's actually confused, meaning to say, I'm not confused at all. It's actually Hurkanas that's confused. Because heich menichin isser skila, how do you set aside something that's forbidden with a punishment of skila? V'yoskin b'isser Shabbos, and instead what you're busy with is isser Shabbos. Rashi explains, isser skila had lokas haner, v'hatzmon aschamin, v'oskin b'davar she'eno ela isser shavus. There are things that are far more serious, the lighting of candles, hatzmon aschamin, to insulate warm things in preparation for Shabbos. And instead, what's he dealing with? Something that's just a shvus, to meineach tefillin b'Shabbos, because putting on tefillin on Shabbos ain't kan isser malacha. That's not a malacha on Shabbos. Even if a person would go in tefillin to Rosh Hashanah, derech malbushu, he's going in a way that as if wearing clothing. That's something that would be considered an adornment on the weekday. So why is he dealing with something like tefillin, which is much more minor isser? And so the Gemara continues, Kevon sharoch hachamim shadaitu miyusheves olav. Once the sages saw that Rabbi Eliezer, that his understanding was settled, that he was not insane, nichnasu v'yoshvu lefanav, they entered, they sat before him. Meirachak dalet amos, they sat before him, but they were distanced by 4 amos. Rashi explains, berichak arba amos when they hanidoi, because he was actually excommunicated. Rabbi Eliezer was excommunicated. Sheberchu b'machlokes tanura shel achnai bab metzia. That was an episode in Bab Metzia where he was excommunicated, so they sat at a distance. So Amar Lui said to them, Lama Basam, why are you coming here? Amar Lei, they said to him, Lilmod Torah Bana, we're coming to learn Torah. Amar Lahem, so he said to them, V'yarachshav Lama Lo Basam, but until now, why didn't you come? Amar Lo, they said to him, Lo Hayalanu Panai, we didn't have time. Amar Leni said to them, Tamiya ani im yamusu misas atzman. I'm going to be surprised if they die a natural death because they haven't come to learn Torah from me. Amar Lo Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said to him, Shalima, what's going to be with me? What's going to be with my death? Amar Lo, he said to him, Shalcha kashim yishalahen. Yours is going to be even worse than them. Rashi explains, Shalom mahu ba'mete misaso, meaning he said, how am I going to die? Shalcha kashim yishalahen. Yours is going to be even more difficult. Mimnei shalibcha pasuach ku'ulam, because your heart, your mind is very open. Vilu shemeshtani hayisalama Torah harbi. Had you served me properly, you would have learned a lot of Torah, so it's going to be even more difficult. And the Brisa continues, not al shteiz ro'osav. So Rabbi Eliezer, he took his 2 arms, v'hinichon alibo, he put it over his heart. Amar, he said, Oy lachem shteiz ro'osai, woe to you, my 2 arms. Shehin keshtei sifrei Torah, they're like 2 sifrei Torah. Sheniglolin, that are rolled up. Harbe Torah lamadati, I learned a lot of Torah. Harbe Torah limadati, I taught a lot of Torah. Harbe Torah lamadati, I learned a lot of Torah. V'lo chasarti merabosai, afilu kekelev hamalakik min hayom, but I didn't take from my rebbeim even like the amount that a dog licks up from the sea, meaning to say I was only able to get a tiny percentage of what was taught to me. And harbe Torah limadati, and I taught a lot of Torah, v'lo chisruni talmidei, but my students didn't get from me, elikim ekchol b'shvoferes, just the amount that a paintbrush removes from a tube. And Rashi explains, Shaniglolin, that the Torah is rolled up, Kishagolin in Sefer Torah, when they roll up a Sefer Torah, Vaksav Mechusa, and the writing is covered, Kach Tasalim Tiskasa, Torah Shabelibi, so to the Torah in my heart is covered, Kishamas when I die, Lefi Shaloshim Shuni Velamdu Mimeni, because people didn't serve me and they didn't learn from me. Velo Chasarti Min Rabosa Kekelev Hamalakik Min Ayom, I didn't take from my Rabbeim, it was just the amount that a dog takes from the sea, Lefi Chachmasam Shaisa Gedol, because they were so wise, Ein Limuda Ola Lachasram Olakavam Chachma. My learning from them wasn't enough to even take away, so to speak, from them to receive wisdom. Elamat, just a tiny amount. Kekelev hamalakik min hayom, like a dog who takes some water from the sea. V'chein talmidai, and similarly, my students, lo chesruni, they didn't make me lack, so to speak. V'lo kiblu me chachmasi, they didn't receive from my wisdom. L'chasr sishon chachmasi mehem afilu kemoshe mechasr mechol b'shvoferes b'tvul echad. Again, they took a small amount, like the amount that the paintbrush would take from the tube. And the Brisa continues, V'lo and not only that, Elashani shona shalosh meos halachos bebaheres aza, I learned 300 halachos when it comes to the white baheres, talking about the halachas of Tzaras. V'lo haya adam sheshoaleni bohen davar me'olam. Nobody asked me about that at all. V'lo and not only that, Elashani shona shalosh meos halachos, I learned 300 halachos. V'amri lo, some say shloshas alpayim, shloshas alavim halachos, 3,000 halachos. Benetias kishuan, when it comes to the planting of cucumbers. V'lo haya adam shoaleni bohen davar me'olam, and nobody asked me anything about that at all. Chutz mi Akiva ben Yosef, except for Akiva ben Yosef, except for Rabbi Akiva. Pamachas ani v'hu mahalchen hayinu b'derech, because one time I and he were walking on the road. Amar li said to me, Rebbe lamdeni benetias kishuan, he said, teach me the planting of the kishuan, of the cucumbers. This is talking about through sorcery. Amarti davar echad, I said one thing, nismala kol asad kishuan, and the entire field was filled with cucumbers. Amar li Rebbe, so he said to me, Rebbe limaratani netiyasan, you taught me, limaratani netiyasan, you taught me the planting of them, limadani akirasan, now teach me how to uproot them. Amarti davar echad, I said one thing, niskabsu kulan l'makam echad, and they were all gathered to one place. And the Brisa continues, Amru lo, the sages said to him, they said to Rabbi Eliezer, Hakadur, the ball, Va'imus, and the last, which is a kind of frame for a shuv, Hakami, and an amulet, Utsror Hamragalios, and a pouch for pearls, Umishkolas Katan, and a small weight. Now all of these things are made from leather, so Mahu, so they said to him, what's the halacha in terms of Tumah and Tara, in terms of purity? Rashi explains, Mahu, Lefishanechliku Be'elu, Rabbi Eliezer v'chachamim b'seider Taros, because when it comes to these items, there was a machlokas Tanoim, there was a machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim, in Meseches Kalim and Seder Taharos, v'chachamim omer me'inan mekabel Tumah. The Chachamim said that these items are not mekabel Tumah, lefi shakli or ein mekabel Tumah, because since it's made of leather, it's not mekabel Tumah. Lim kein yeshlo beis kibul, it has to have a receptacle area. D'ha iskish lasak, it's compared to sackcloth. V'hani hol v'kibula nasis lamalosa. Now here, in these cases, since the receptacle area is really made to be filled, miloi basocha olamis, and it's meant to be filled permanently, lo shmei kibul, that's not called a receptacle. Rabbi Eliezer says makabel tumah, that they in fact are makabel tumah. The base kibul haser lamalo shmei kibul, that's called a receptacle area. There's another machlokus over there. Let's say the ball, or the frame for the shoe. Let's say that tears v'nira cholol shelahem, and you can see the cavity. To modu rabbanon the makabel tumah, the rabbanon say there's makabel tumah, the ika base kibul, there is a receptacle area there. Upligi linyan tvila, but there's a machlokus in terms of immersion. Shachachamim omer masha b'socha chotzeitz, the chachamim say there's considered a separation. Rabbi Eliezer omer masha b'socha eno chotzeitz, what's in there is not a separation. To kuli chad kli, it's all considered to be one vessel. Oveshas petirasa, now the point over here is that at the time of his death, hayurotzen leidam chazerbo, they wanted to know if Rabbi Eliezer changed his mind. Veshalu, so they asked him, Matza omer bosan shneim machlokus, what do you say about these two arguments? Amar lehem tameim, he said to them that it's in fact impure. Afilu shleimim, even if it's complete, if it's whole. V'atuma nogas mi v'achutz, and the tumah is touching from the outside. As the Brisa now continues, Amar Lani said to them, Hein tamehin, he said they are in fact tamei. V'taharasan b'mashein, and to make it pure, it's b'mashein, it's what's with them, what's in them. Rashi explains, Betarasan b'mashein kilomar means to say as follows: Im nikru, if they tear, shechachamim modim shemekabel tuma, because there the chacham say it's mekabel tuma. V'chalukan alai lomar shehamiloi chotzetz, and then they argue it with me in terms of saying that there's a chatzitza separation. V'yomer ani b'dvari, but I stand by what I said. Shehamiloi eino chotzetz, that what's filling over there is not considered a separation. Shematzvilan kemos shehein, that you're able to immerse it as is. And the Brisa continues, Minol shal gabe ho'imus mahu. What if you have the shoe and it's actually on the last, it's on this frame? What's the halach over there? Amar Leni said to them, Hu tahar, then in that case it is tahar, it is pure. V'yotza nishmaso b'tahara, and his soul departed him b'tahara, as he was saying this word pure. Rashi explains, Minol shal gabe imos mahu. What about if you have the shoe on top of the last? Sha'af bo nechliku b'tosef the taharos. There's also machlokas tanoim. Chachamim omen hoel ve'eno mechusar malocha tzricha uman shehed yod yochel esalko mi'al ho'imos. So the Chachamim say, since you don't need a professional anymore, anybody's able to remove it from that frame. Kvar shem kliola v'tamei. So it's considered already a vessel, and it's tamei. Rabbi Eliezer metar, but Rabbi Eliezer says it's pure. Sha'adayin lo nigmar malachto, because still the malacha is not finished. And again, he said the word tar. That was his last word. V'yotza nishmasu b'tahar, and his soul departed him in purity. And the Brisa continues, Amar Rav Yoshua al ragla v'yamar. So Rav Yoshua stood up on his feet, stood up and he said, Hutar haneder, that the neder, this neder has been undone. Rashi explains, Hutar haneder means shebarchu, meaning to say that excommunication is no longer. L'motzoi Shabbos, and Motzoi Shabbos, pagabo Rabbi Akiva min Kesari l'lud, hayamaka b'v'saro, at shedamo shoses la'aretz. Rabbi Akiva, he met up with them, meaning to say, the funeral was taking place, and from Kesari, from Caesarea to Lud, Rabbi Akiva was striking his flesh, makav v'saro, he was striking his body, at shedamo shoses la'aretz, until his blood was dripping to the earth. Pasach ala b'shura, and then he opened with the following words when they were in the row for the eulogy. V'yamar, and he said, Avi, rechav Yisrael u'farashav, Father, chariot of Israel and his horsemen. Harbe mos, yeshli, I have a lot of money. Ve'en li shulchani lahartzosim, but I don't have a money changer who I can exchange with. Rashi explains, Pasach ala b'shura, first he opened with the following words, Shayu osin, shura, because they were making a roast, vivos hamita, around the coffin, lehesped, for the purposes of a hesped, for a eulogy. Going back one Rashi again, ben Kesari lelud, from Kesari to Lud, Shayu nosin es mitaso, they were carrying the coffin, me Kesari lelud, from Kesari to Lud. And he said, Harbe mos yeshli, I have a lot of money, lahachlef, to exchange, ve'en li shulchani lahartzosim, but I don't have a money changer. Kolomar harbe she'elos yeshli lishol, what he was really saying was, I have many questions to ask, but I don't have anyone that I can ask these questions to. That's what Rabbi Akiva was saying. And the Gemara in any case says, Alma, don't we see from this, may Rabbi Eliezer Gomer, that when it comes to the sorcery for the cucumbers, again, he actually learned it from Rabbi Eliezer. This is all a lead up to that question, because in our mission it seemed to be that he learned it from Rabbi Yoshua. And the Gemara answers, Gomer me Rabbi Eliezer. Indeed, he did learn it from Rabbi Eliezer, however, velo savra, however, he didn't understand it. So then, Hadr Gomer me Rabbi Yoshua, v'asavra nihile. So then, he learned it from Rabbi Yoshua, he explained it to him. But the Gemara continues, Heichi Avid Hachi, but how did he even do this? Rashi explains, Heichi Avid Rabbi Eliezer Hachi, Sha'asa Maisa ben Atias Kishun, how can he do the sorcery when it comes to the planting of the cucumbers that should not have even been allowed? Because again, that violates a prohibition. V'anon Tanan, didn't we learn in the Mishnah, Ha'osa Maisa Chayiv, that if somebody does an action, so the person is actually Chayiv if he does an action of sorcery. And the Gemara says, L'hislam made shani, when it comes to do it in order to teach, in order to learn, that is different. Rashi says, L'hislam made Bohem Rabbi Akiva hu David, Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer did it in order that Rabbi Akiva should be able to learn, and that is different. Diyamar Mar, because the master said, Lo silmod lasos, it says you can't learn in order to do, meaning lasos yata lamed, avalata lamed lahavinu lahoros. You're not allowed to learn in order to do it, but if it's in order to understand and to teach, then it is okay. Hadran aloch arba misos, we will return to you, parak arba misos. This is the end of the 7th parak of Mesechet Sanhedrin. If you're enjoying these videos and this channel, please like, share, and subscribe, and take a look at the description box below to see how you can support this channel. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video, in the 8th parak of Mesechet Sanhedrin, on Daf Samech Ches Amud Beis.